Welcome to you. And also, this is a book. I've written three works of fiction, and I take the idea of fiction quite strictly. It is something you do make up, and it's not something you just copy out of life and put out there. But with Arzid and Dwarf and Clouds, everything was made up. In Days of My China Dragon, I had the benefit of having not only some very good material at hand, but also a very good protagonist. And I thought when they invited me to the festival, it would be wrong not to bring him along. So this is Rupesh, and 10 years ago, I grew up in Bombay, as did Rupesh. We are both Bombayites. And 10 years ago, when my first book came out, for the first time, I had some money to rent my own place in Bombay and live by myself, which was a great dream of mine. And for many years, that had not been possible. And I found a little place in Pravadevi, a little rundown apartment, a hole in the wall, and moved there exactly 10 years ago. And I remember it was a rainy day, just like last night. And as I was traveling in Bombay with all my like possessions and my books, there was a very dark cloud hanging like a blanket over South Bombay. And from the North Bombay, you could see there was going to be a big downpour. And just when I arrived, it began to rain. And I was so hungry, I went running out to find a little lunch to eat. And I saw this little glass door of a small place, two buildings away from my house. And I walked in, and that was my initiation one Sunday afternoon in the real life China Dragon, which was Rupesh's restaurant. Uh, Rupesh, do you want to say something? I've forgotten when we first met. Do you remember?
Actually, we met on the same day you came, and I was not there in the restaurant.
Hmm.
To be precise, I was out in the market somewhere, and I had a captain in the name of Borun.
What is
And
the captain? I thought you are the captain.
no, the captain is one who is in charge. If is like a manager, is like a manager of the restaurant. Like he came and told me one man had come some time back. He'll be your good friend. I said, who is this? Did he eat something? Like, yeah, वो कुछ खा के गया है. Like ठीक है मैं मिल लेगा. Just a casual thing. And we happened to meet in the evening. He came back that I'm your neighbor now. So I was very happy to meet him. That was the same day when he had just entered.
Okay, and I obviously had no clue that this would be such a big place in my life. I've been a self-employed writer all my working life, so I have no institutional connections at all. And so, for a few years in my life, the China Dragon became the institution that was most central to my world, and that was the only home I had outside of my own house. And very often I wouldn't have a lot of work and I would pass by. And, this is the thing about life when you know your friends are in a certain direction and there's only a glass door separating you from them. You always turn, even if you're not planning to go into the restaurant. You have no desire to eat anything. You turn to see if there's any familiar faces in on the other side of the transparent wall. And then when they see you, they wave, and then you wave, and you think, oh, what the heck? Let's go in for a while and have a chat, have a cup of tea, have a little and very soon I found myself sucked into the world of the dragon, which was a very multifaceted world where it was, no matter what, you couldn't, these are the places where you realize that economics is not at all a reliable guide to life because you could have 7 days in which the takings were exactly the same and the profits were exactly the same. But each day had its own drama, its own character, its own set of protagonists who came and went, and its own combinations of what happened. And very soon I found myself very attracted by this daily dose. It was like a bit like Netflix before its time. And there was a kind of master of ceremonies above it all, which was Rupesh himself. And one of the things I like very much, and I still like it very much about you, is that there's some similarity between writing fiction and running a restaurant, which is that they're both industries in which you have to love people, and your job is in trying to think what makes human nature work, and in your case more than mine because my character is imaginary, how to make people happy for that small time that they enter your world, isn't it?
See, for me, actually, each and every customer is like a friend of yours, and you have to make him comfortable. Since we were a small joint, so even if I'm not, if I was not there, then there was a problem all the time. Like people used to call me also, like they were taking care of smallest of things. Like, अरे बहुत दिन से आप आए नहीं, why did you come? अरे for a long time you're not been here. As if like, and every day he has to come. as if every day he has to come. Like, it is, you can say it is marketing, or make the customers comfortable, or to know the customer's taste, even, which was very important. And some customers used to come for, like, अरे कुछ अभी dialogue मारेगा. And even they used to tell, अरे तुम्हारा बॉस को बुलाओ तो ही ऑर्डर देगा. So personally we used to treat the customers, like, that was one of the things. Then used to come the taste, like, we used to remember, like, this fellow eats a lot of spicy, this fellow doesn't like spice, this fellow has a sweet tooth, so उसको एक sweet कुछ तो देना ही पड़ता है, complimentary दे दो, so so that they come back. So these are all small trade, this thing, like, we used to take care of, like, each and everything. Hash was not one of them. He was a friend. Like, he used to always be there. I don't think so he saw any restaurant as close as.
No, it was like a home of mine, and it's actually I don't live in Bombay anymore, but it's the only thing I miss about that not having a restaurant to go to. But uh, in a way, it became a whole new life for me because I think what I enjoyed most about the place was that I had unlimited access to it, not only as a customer but after hours. And when I wrote this book, I wanted to represent that truth about restaurants, which is that we think that we go to restaurants to eat, and of course we do. But what we don't realize is that the people who work in the restaurant also eat there after we go. And in a way, when you change the frame after hours, after 11 o'clock, when the shutters go down, all the staff often would used to sit at the very same tables. And I used to really enjoy first seeing that although they cooked and served Chinese all day long, they would never dream of eating it themselves. They detested that and would make, and often there would be, and the staff was a very interesting mix of boys from the Maratha hinterland around Bombay, Bengali chefs, young men from Nepal, and it was a little India of a most fascinating kind, where there was a real freedom of partly because the boss was an interesting man, and people's personalities shone through, and often it was a kind of school of character because not only would we privately discuss, will the waiter make it, will the chef, is he good for the business, is this a good attitude, but often the waiters themselves would deliver little analysis of the characters after they were of the customers after they were gone. And in a way it was a most profound experience of thinking about human nature and what makes people work. And something I really grew to enjoy was, Bombay is a much tougher city than Bangalore in the self conception of its people. Nobody in Bombay wants to be seen as being innocent or naive. They would do anything to prevent themselves being accused of that. And so you had all these tough guys who would come into a restaurant, hardened by life and by the stresses of living in Bombay. But I found that no matter how silent, grim, and inward a person was, in that 1 or 2 seconds when a waiter stands above you and instead of putting the dish down in front of you says, "Sir, kya main serve karu?" There is a kind of flicker in people's eyes because you cannot miss that gesture of being cared for. And in a way, this was the business of the restaurant, not just to, and I say in the book, is something that I learned from Rupesh's attitude, which is that the difference between business and hospitality is that you don't just, the job of the restaurant is not just to make food hot for the customer, but also to make time warm and nourishing. And this is something that we really grew to enjoy in the restaurant, which was that people would come in a certain mood and leave in another. And in a way, it was a little theater where they were allowed to release themselves. And often, first time customers would confess all sorts of things that they couldn't tell anyone else. And it was a bit like a cross between, a theater, eating house, and a place where some sort of therapy went on. And so every day had different kinds of stories, and we would sometimes think about the customers and sometimes about the staff. And there would be all these discussion sessions. But there are also some invisible characters in the book and in the world of the restaurant itself, because before it was a Chinese restaurant, Rupesh, and this is something I write about in the book. It was for a long time an Udupi joint, and in a way, you have been working in the restaurant industry. How many years? Well, you're 7 years older than me, so you must be 46. Am I right? How many? When did you start work in the restaurant trade? And who was your guru in the industry?
Goes without saying, Guru was my father.
Yeah.
And I used to work in my restaurant right from I was 11 years old. Like, I was to be taken from, I in May holidays. when we used to get summer vacations.
Yes.
Father used to take me there to learn. But there was a lot of this thing, generation gap between me and my father. Like we were 45 years of difference. So he is a little bit insecure, orthodox type of a person. So he used to take me, like,
Was your father from Bombay or from
he
somewhere
was
else?
from Karnataka. He was
Okay.
from Bangalore.
Ah, I see.
We are basically Mangaloreans, and he had ran away from Mangalore because they were very poor. Like, he left his studies. He burned his, even in the book he has his, he burnt his English books. And he
This is
ran
in the
away
Quit
to,
India
yeah,
era.
it
Okay.
was before independence, little bit here and there. And he came to Bombay just because they used to, they used to not have food proper to eat in Bangalore. Very poor. So he came, and I joined him fully in 1992 at the time of Hindu Muslim riots in Bombay, which was at peak. It was
Yes.
very difficult times. He took me that time. I just finished my studies, and he took me like, we have to go together because anything may happen. So we used to go together. And in '93, completely I took over from him. That was when bomb blast took place. So I was welcomed by these two, you know. So I started my career in 1993, to be precise. And that was a Udupi restaurant at that time, which was very difficult. We used to start we are in the 7 o'clock in the morning till the 11 o'clock at night. So, and no break. Like the Chinese one had a break in between, like, 3 hours break, but there was no break in Udupi restaurant. And Udupi restaurant never stops. You cannot stop at all. You have to keep standing on your feet like the whole day, having a flat foot and owner. And I was taught by my dad each and everything of the restaurant line, like giving cooking to to serving the people, like smallest of things, like customer is God, the basics, like उसका दिल जितना है तो उसके पेट में घुसो. saying the saying says that if you have to win his heart through his stomach.
Hmm.
So it was all that type, and उसको ऐसा खिलाओ जैसा कि उसके बीवी भी उसको नहीं खिलाता रहेगा.
Rupesh, I really miss this language. I'm from Bombay. I lived there for 40 years. I miss this. And only a Bombayite can laugh and say the bomb fata. That's all. Only a Bombayite can do that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
When
go
the
on.
bomb blast took place, I went near the blast. We all my staff, we put the shutters down, and we were at the place where the bomb blast occurred.
Because it was at Century Bazaar where the
Because it
restaurant
was very
restaurant
near
is.
to our restaurant. It
Yes.
was hardly 5 minutes walk. So we all visited there, and it was normally thing like. And the next day we opened the restaurant again.
Mm. Yes.
Bombay never sleeps, it seems.
Yes.
And it is true.
Hmm.
Uh,
There's one thing I found very fascinating, which I also wrote about in the book. In a way, you would, although I know you were given a very hard initiation by your father and made to work even washing dishes in the restaurant, although you were the boss's son, you would have known subconsciously that one day you are going to inherit the business. When did that happen, and why did your father, instead of giving you the business, why did he charge rent from you?
See, but I used to go with him to the market. They used to say, "तुम्हारा पिताजी military का आदमी है." He was very strict by nature, and he had some principles that, why should I give you just like that? I would have earned so much of rent if I'm giving outside. Okay, तुमको 5,000 रुपए discount. तुम 5,000 कम दो, but you give it to me. And he used to sit on my head on the first of every month and take the money. And my treasurer was my mom. Because all the money, whatever, all the accounts, my mom is to be taking care of. अच्छा ठीक है कितना पैसा है? She's he's doing well now. So, and I used to hardly get anything for the first 2 years when I took over from him, because the rent he charged, he was a very calculative person. He calculated the profits he was making, and he increased some 5,000 rupees, and then he gave me some discount. So it was a typical businessman.
This is a very roundabout
Uh,
sum.
yeah, no, but I made really good efforts after that, and it was a nice ploy by him. And I made it for that. Within 2 years, I started making profit, little bit for myself, but that was it. Like,
Would you do things? This is the strange thing about the handover of authority in India, that the person who gives the institution away still wants to in some way run it. And would your father get upset with you because you did things differently?
There was difference of opinion, obviously, because there was 45 years of generation gap. Has to be like, grilled sandwiches was making their way into the Udupi restaurant that time in
Really? So,
1993.
so that is a bit of the social history of
And
Bombay.
yeah,
Yes.
and what is this cheese toast? All and cheese toast abhi happening.
Or you were the person who introduced cheese toast into
Yeah,
Udupi.
then,
Yes.
means, I knew we used to eat outside, but my
Yes.
dad used to very rarely eat outside. He was a typical kanjus, never eating
But
outside.
it's true in the 90s, even we grew up, we were allowed to eat out once. This is something that young people today just don't understand.
Eating
Yeah.
out was very rare. Like even
Yes.
in my childhood
This is
days,
something
we
we all share.
we rarely ate outside. Now it has become everyday affair. Like
Yes, to the point where even your daughter used to ask for takeaway from the China Dragon herself when you used to come home.
even my wife used to.
Okay. Your wife is here as
But
well.
we were disciplined. Like once in 15 days only, we will get a food from. You can call and you can
Mm,
order, because
mm.
that tradition we had to keep, because nahi to every day she will stop making food and call.
Uh-huh. Okay, I'm going to break a little bit because we have talked about the life, the shared life from which this book emerged. What I'm going to do very quickly is give you a little taste of the book, which I tried to make. It's told in the voice of the proprietor, Jigar Palas, which is modeled on Rupesh. I made few little changes to make it into an English world. And so the entire book is told in his voice about the things that happen in a restaurant. Each story is a different episode in the life of the China Dragon. And sometimes the focus shifts from a customer to the education of the staff. And this story is what I call a portrait of the waiter as a young man. For many months after he first came to work at the China Dragon, the general consensus among me and all the staff was that every day was potentially the waiter Pintu Masurkar's last day at work. The joke amongst them, which often reached Pintu's ears and made him smile with a mixture of embarrassment and self pity, was that Pintu had in his wallet a permanent unreserved ticket back to his hometown Kolhapur on the Yashwantpur Express, which leaves Dadar TT at 4 o'clock every afternoon. The day he was fired, at least he would be home to his mother before midnight, unless, of course, he got off at the wrong station. Not that there was a problem with Pintu's attitude, as there has been and always will be among staff members at my restaurant and in the restaurant industry in general. For there is nothing like the restaurant business to test a man's character, and nothing like man's character to test the restaurant business. No. Our Pintu was not a sly cooker up of plots and schemes like some other people in the staff, nor was he a slacker like some of the other waiters. He didn't want all the good gigs like getting to ride the bicycle for home deliveries. And nor was he always angling for a raise. He took no pleasure in watching someone else get ticked off, as he could well have done, given how often he was in trouble himself. He had no bad habits like chewing gutka or drinking tharra, and I know that he sent half his salary home to his family. Even when he was no longer the junior most of the waiters, he was still the last to serve himself from the pot of staff food. And not only did Pintu not take any extra days off, even on his weekly day off, he could sometimes be seen hanging around the restaurant, pathetically lonely and ill at ease without the very folk who pulled his leg so relentlessly, for this lost soul had no other friends. No, Pinto's problem was that he was just so eager, so sweet, so nervous, and so out of place in Bombay. Forget doing work. He had so many complexes, insecurities, reservations, and doubts that just being a body in space and time was a matter of continuous difficulty for him. For his work, he had to wear a white shirt, black pants, and a black waistcoat. And just this beginning unnerved him. He, who had worn cast offs from his older brother all his life and thought that only rich people wore a second layer of clothing. Now, Pinto was a well dressed waiter in a good class of restaurant, but he did not have the personality or confidence to play this beginner's role in the theater of restaurant life. Or maybe as a director, was not good enough. Who knows? Then, coming from a small town in a dal bhat sabzi kind of background, he had no understanding of what Chinese food was all about. So he could not explain the ingredients and styles of different dishes to the customers with any conviction, other than murmuring things like gravy dish or dry mix, very good when pressed, which can hardly be the way to work up anyone's appetite or get them to order the dishes that make profits for the restaurant. My argument to Pintu that nobody in India actually knows what real Chinese food is all about, Pintu. especially customers. It's all a big con game and you are just another player. This had no effect on Pinto. He first had to jump through the hoops of Bombay and restaurant life before he could get to Chinese, which is a lot to ask for any traveler on this, our long, twisting, noodle like road of life. I want at this stage to reflect a little bit. I'm going to ask myself a question. Why not? Since there's no interviews on stage but ourselves. And I think while, because of the restaurant, I became a different kind of writer to the one I was. And I learned, I have like a lot of Indian writers who come from middle class, upper middle class backgrounds. We have a very English kind of background, and that's how we begin our writing stage. In a way, although I continue to write in English, living in the restaurant, talking to all the people who came there, I learned how to uh, um, deepen the register of their voices I could write in. And I especially began to love trying to find a style where all of these people could come in and look comfortable and be themselves. And I especially loved the little bits of philosophizing and the little bits of philosophy and throwaway remarks that would go on, because those little episodes also represent in the book. There's no story in some of the stories in the book. It's just a single thought that comes into the proprietor's head as he sees something going on, including the story of the bomb blast of 1992. But sometimes I also like, it was a very good. I think, although I've been to two universities in my life and have 2 degrees, this at the age of 30 was the greatest university I ever went to. It was one for which I paid no fees other than ordering a few fried rices from time to time, and I got no certificates. But when I left Bombay and moved to Delhi, I realized that I changed as a human being because of my years there. And in some way, it was because of my education, an education for which just came about as a coincidence. And so one of the things I really learned, which I still do to this day, was to think about what happens when you feed somebody and when you cook for somebody. And since then, as a man I've changed from being a man who used to cook occasionally to someone who cooks every week, and we have dinner parties modeled on what we used to do at the China Dragon. But what I miss, Rupesh, most of all, is the sound of your voice. And sometimes when you'd come in and people were down, what are the sort of things one has to do as a proprietor to, like, can one, for instance, entertain them with different kinds of voices? Can we hear a little Bombaya from you?
See, before talking about the voices, that used to just entertain everyone and keep everyone smiling all the time. Like he said, Pintu had a ticket, the return ticket to his native place. That was for real. Actually, to tell you the fact, he was very nervous character. So I used to always come up with, whenever something happens, little bit here and there, Pintu comes, "मैं काम छोड़ता है." And we being a small restaurant, even one of the waiters left, then we had a problem. So I used to always, like you started, "Hey Pintu, किधर जा रहा है रे? उधर कुछ नहीं है, इधर ही है तो टेंशन मत ले, मैं है ना." Like we used to in the kitchen also. We used to all the time kid, "पानी देगा क्या?" Like, and even with the customers, like customer तुमको बुलाता है, बोलते हैं वो अमिताभ बच्चन जैसा बात करता है.
Many people would come just to hear the voice of the proprietor. Yes.
Yeah.
Rupesh, you have a very deep baritone. Other than Amitabh Bachchan and Sanjay Dutt, you must be third in Bombay for depth of voice and richness of tone.
Just to keep up with the situations, bad situations, we used to just to distract them, like all the time. Even my father used to do it, even I used to do it, like some jokes, some faltu jokes, like, and they used to be happy, they used to be very happy about it. So, and Pintu जैसा मेरे पास बहुत 3-4 थे, like there are 3 to 4 people who are like Pintu, like eager to go to their native place.
Yes.
Anything little bit here and there, चलो मैं निकला. So it was that way. So that voices type, not actually, we used to not remove it intentionally, but then these people used to say a lot of movies and all,
This was very
because the
interesting.
theater
That
was very
yeah.
nearby.
Mm.
So all the time, this time, just to time pass, they used to go and see movies. So if you say something about Are kya, and we also used to see movies, like I used to just go into the Satyam theater and just sit without a ticket and come back. So it was that way. They very much, we used to just go things going. We used to.
Do you feel, I know the restaurant, that one of the things I noticed about the changing culture of food in India as related to restaurants is that instead of people going to a restaurant as we used to, people now order in, and Swiggy and Zomato have become very big. I know that's good for business, but what does it do to the idea of the restaurant as a place where you meet people by surprise. And in a way, I always felt that my education in India was in the China Dragon. And I feel if many of the customers could afford to just order at home, and people are always willing to deliver, you forget that when you go to a restaurant, you take something, you also give something of yourself. And when you order in, you leave that out. Do you feel that like at least we worked in a good time where everybody, even those who could order home delivery, said, "आज मैं restaurant जाके खाएगा."
Eating in a restaurant and getting a parcel, you are just compromising on eating. That is what my parcel is. Something like, it loses its taste, as well as the touch, the personal touch which you have in a restaurant. In a small restaurant, I'm talking about.
Yes.
I'm not talking about Lalit or any big restaurant, big hotels.
Yes.
But the small restaurants, usually, I think it is better to go and sit there and eat.
Mm.
Rather, the personal touch. And even, my father used to say that plastic में कुछ chemical reaction होता है, इसलिए वो food का taste खराब हो जाता है. When I think so, when first time plastic came, he bought some parcel at home. बोला ये वापस नहीं लाएगा, कुछ तो smell आता है. But now we are not used to the smell of plastic actually.
Yes.
Because everything is in plastic nowadays. So I always used to advise my customers, please come here and have. If you cannot, then it's another story. But otherwise, make it a point to come and have. Even to my wife, I used to say, don't call for parcel. You come so that you can talk to my staff also once in a blue moon. She used to also come.
Amazing. I think this is something I learned from you, that actually when people order takeaway, it helps the restaurant because you save so much money on washing up and stuff. But even so, I always found you telling people like the profit is not what is important. What's important is that we see you. And these are all little human touches that I felt as a kind of small slice of social history in Bombay. I was very experienced to, very fortunate to experience this, and that's what I've written up in this book. Which afterwards, I think we are both available to sign it. And so we quickly have 3 or 4 minutes for.
We have one question, 2
Yeah.
minutes.
Okay. Uh,
My question here is for Mr. Pai. So your father seems like quite an interesting character. Do you have anything to say about him and his life? He seems like quite an interesting character from what you've described of him.
can you say something in your father's voice, since you do voices? A little advice for yourself or for this young man over here.
See, he came to Bombay with a half pant and a shirt, and he was very poor. He worked in his uncle's hotel for some days without any money. And when he came to know that I'm not going to get any money, only food and shelter, so he ran away from there again. And he then got himself employed in some other restaurant. And then he started making some money. Then he went on to become a BST conductor. That is there in the book.
Yes, he used to work in the Bombay bus as a conductor for many
As
years.
a bus conductor. And he has done various businesses like laundry and restaurant and BST conductor. So, at some point of time, he used to tell me that I used to work for 18 to 19 hours in a day.
Is there a
May-
moral of? Huh?
Maybe that gave him some kind of resilience, and maybe he's strict, orderly. But wait, how did he run a restaurant? Is my other question.
And that's the lie. I'm sorry.
No, my part of this question is how did he run a restaurant?
He collected money and he took a restaurant on rent initially. Then he got his own, after he had two restaurants. Then he sold off one to take a house for himself. And one restaurant which he used to run. That was the restaurant which I am running.
Maybe you should talk to him.
Yes.
I think he's pretty much interested. We'll give him some insight and inspiration. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we've run out of time, but I want to thank you all because it's very nice to see such a big house. It's the first ever event this is Rupesh's first ever literary festival appearance. So I think he has taken away a false idea that thousands of people come and you always have a full house. But
we do. We have a full house today.
yes, so I want to thank you all, but I also want to thank you, Rupesh, for giving me all these wonderful things in life. And
My pleasure.
So maybe the China Dragon continues and we have more stories about it. Thank you.